Welcome to this episode, Dr. James Beckett Sports Card Insights. I'm here with Pepper Hastings. We are doing a tribute to Larry and Jeff Fritsch out of Wisconsin, two larger-than-life, literally, figures who both had untimely passing but cast a long shadow. Very huge figures in our industry, but have been Larry passed away more than 10 years ago, and Jeff a couple of years ago. So, but first, thank the sponsors: Topps, Upper Deck, Panini, Heritage Auctions, Huggins Scott Auctions, Mike's Stadium Sports Cards, Burbank Sports Cards, Beckett Media, which includes Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentication, Beckett Online Price Guide, all the different Beckett entities under Beckett.com, and ComC.com. So I'm here with Pepper Hastings, who had, I would say, as I did, a professional relationship with the Fritsches, as well as somewhat of a personal relationship. You visited with them a couple times. I went up there with you one time, and those guys were amazing. It's almost like in a foreign country. You know, you go up to kind of northern Wisconsin.
Right. It's in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, but it's really not in Stevens Point. It's way outside, kind of near a lake.
Right.
And for those, the uninitiated, Larry Fritsch Cards started, I believe, in 1970 as the first full-time sports card dealer.
Sports card dealer.
Now, remember, though, he was mostly a mail order dealer, and then eventually internet and eBay.
And then he had a store in
Cooperstown. He had a store in Cooperstown. But his place of business in Stevens Point did not have, the traditional glass cases where you have a high traffic walk-in type of thing, because it was more of a destination, not somewhere.
Well, I don't think they were welcoming.
They weren't unwelcoming, but they
didn't go either way.
They weren't set up for walk-in business. It was retail. And that's what made it. It's almost like, in the movie Platoon, where Marlon Brando is stuck up in the mountains, and he's up there in the cave, and it's like these people. I mean, Larry Fritsch, that place, I think you'll agree, and it's probably on your list as one of the 7 collecting wonders.
Absolutely.
Of the world.
Absolutely. You just wanted to gawk. And then you realize, and it wasn't, there were no expensive fixtures, or it was just raw cards and quantity. And I look back at those early catalogs, and I was in the industry in the early 70s. You'd get the catalogs. It was one of the few catalogs, one place where you could buy cards. And I remember discussing with Gervis and other early collecting guys that it's just so expensive to order from Larry Fritsch, but when you now go back and think and look at those catalogs, yes, he was pricing things higher than what the going rate was at a card show. And there really were any card shops in the early 70s like that. But his cards were all mint. In fact, they were not even gem mint out of the pack. They'd never been in a pack. Most of what he got from Topps in the early days were cut card cases, that had never had a whiff of gum near them. And so they had no deterioration from that. And so he had amazing stuff that, other than some miscuts occasionally, was super sharp corners. So but to see all that and to see all these millions of cards stacked up and not super well organized, but organized enough that he could find what he wanted.
Well, it's not many people. I mean, not a whole lot of people have been up there to see this.
No, I think,
and
unfortunately not.
Not a lot of people have been in the vault.
Right.
And not a lot of people have been into the warehouses out back.
Right.
And the vastness of it is unbelievable. Of course, we know that Larry owned a Wagner card, and everybody knew that. It was eventually put into an SCG, sports card, SCD slab. Yeah. But anyway, at any rate, and he had a plank. But what I remember the first time I was up there by myself, is he wanted to show me the 1908 Rose Company postcard sets that he had. Not just one set, but 3 complete sets, and each one was better than the one before. So he had collected. I mean, that's like 200 cards at least.
Oh, he did 3 of a lot of things. It was one for himself, one for Jeff, and one for Cooperstown. That's the sense I always had about his 3.
And each one he tried to make a little bit better grade than the one before it. And he was so proud of that Rose Company set. Yeah. More so than pulling out the.
Well, he was a real collector at heart, and he occasionally would trade some of his quantity. Nowadays when you think of quantity, you think of modern card quantity. Well, these were old cards quantity. I mean, not 30s but he had the 70s. He had massive quantity there, and he wasn't. Even though, like you said, he was aware of condition, but he was not an early adopter of grading, because he could grade his own cards. He could see, and most of his cards were mint. So tell me, when you went up there, and I went up there that one time to try to close the deal, and in fact, we were not able to close the deal of getting him to choose BGS as his grader of choice. And I never got real upset about that because he chose his fellow Wisconsinites, the Krause team, who were just kind of getting into grading and were not established. And it attempted to put them on the map, and I don't think it was as successful, but that's the kind of loyalty that he had, and I think he was a real straight shooter. Yeah,
he was a longtime advertiser, in Sports Collectors Digest, and he was good friends, like you said, with all the crew at Krause.
Right.
And, we wanted, the idea to go up there was to do a pedigree, grading for him and have his name on the
personal
back. Yeah, because everything
collection of
Larry Fritsch, and the warehouses out back were just cases and cases and cases.
Well, he would have needed prep. I mean, we might have not
set up shop.
We might have not made money.
Yeah, we would have had to put,
in the sense you'd have to have somebody on location. They'd have to be pre-screening the cards, right. And then when you think of the bill, for the grading, so we discussed those kind of things with him. He's a very astute business guy.
The great thing about him is that I like to talk to him about the hunting up there.
Yeah.
And he really liked to tell me about the cranberries. There's up in Wisconsin in the fall, which was in November, which when we went up there both times. There's cranberry bogs.
Yeah.
And they float these things, and that's how you harvest them. You fill it up with water, they come off the plant, and then you skim them off. But he was, it's a fun trip to go up there to see those guys. Jeff was just as nice a guy as Larry.
Yeah. He was nicer.
They were two peas in a pod.
They had a little bit of a crusty exterior, but they were huge guys.
Yeah.
They're really big guys. The kind of guys that, I know you played more baseball, and I played a lot of fast pitch and slow pitch softball, but these are the kind, they were baseball guys. These are the kind of guys, if they're playing softball or slow pitch softball, and they step up to the plate, you start backing up.
Well, I know.
They were really big guys.
Well, and they
love baseball.
They gave back to their community.
Exactly.
Larry was the president of the local Little League, he coached. Jeff did the same thing with his kids.
Right.
There's probably a picture of the guy in the Applebee's over there as a local
hero.
Local hero.
Yeah.
The coolest thing I saw, Jim, when I was up there was he pulled out, and I went back and looked at my notes from this visit. I've kept all my notes. He pulled out the Jim Thorpe tin, that Colgan's Chips. Colgan's Chips tin. And he told me, at that time, he said it's the only one that anybody had known about.
Well,
and he bought it from a local stamp collector who was his buddy for $1. And so it was 200 more of those Colgan's tins, or the Colgan's Chips, which I guess were actually chewing gum chips that came in a small tin, maybe
some
the
kind
size
of candy
of
stuff was in it. Yeah, I don't know.
But there was only one Jim Thorpe for many years that I knew about. I read about one later when we were doing Beckett Vintage magazine. About one showed up at a Mastro auction in maybe 2007 or 2008. That was in a big find somewhere. But to me, to hold something that was in my hands, that was the only one, and it was Jim Thorpe. And he's just standing there with it, and it's in like a little top holder thing, right?
Yeah.
And so, within the card shop was an actual, like a bank vault.
Yeah.
That wasn't in a wall. It was just kind of this freestanding, big walk-in bank vault. You remember going into that?
Yeah, but I'm just thinking, it's just,
he was so, it was just fun I felt like, you're just sitting there with somebody that it's like watching Einstein talk about the light bulb.
Yeah, who's also like a mountain man. Yeah. It just was amazing. When I was up there, and I didn't ask you about this, but he also has a claim to fame of producing some really interesting sets. He did some minor league sets back in I think that was probably in the early 80s or so.
Tons of reprint sets.
And then he did reprint sets, but he also did these one-year wonders, and he did the girls professional.
Girls professional
league. So again, he was an innovator and was doing new things. So I'm thinking he had a good life. Jeff had a good life, and yet I think Larry died of cancer at the age of 71, which now is seeming to be. In fact, it's ironic. We're having this conversation, and I'm pushing Larry's age, and you're pushing Jeff's age. Jeff passed away a couple of years ago. I think it was a heart attack, but again, sudden, untimely passing, and
I think
so you're telling me
son, Jeremy, is running the show, or at least has a big part in it now.
How do you do estate planning for something like that? It's just really, really hard. Like I said, the massive amount of cards that he had. It wasn't just. I guess I've got to throw in the fact that he just didn't have quantity. He had amazing quantity, but he had amazing quality, and then he had another layer of knowledge of baseball. He wasn't huge on the other sports, as I recall, but I'd have some phone conversations with him about when I was doing the price guides back in the 70s, 80s, maybe a little bit in the 90s.
Did he fill out a survey? Did he?
He wouldn't do surveys. He used to just call me. And so I'd call him, and he just, I talk to him, and he'd start talking and tell some great stories and talk about one thing that was really helpful in the early days is the pioneer guys. They didn't always talk in terms of pricing as much as you could get some idea of the level of scarcity or rarity. And so there were things he would never sell, and there were things that didn't have a price on them, but he would do trades sometimes for something that he wanted. He could throw a whole bunch of really good stuff at something. If he wanted something that you had, he was formidable. But I think fair. But again, he was somebody that our industry. He was just a pace setter. I don't know that like I said, you said he didn't come in contact with other people. He didn't go to very many nationals, but he wasn't reclusive. It's just. He had, like you said, hunting and fishing and stuff like that. He just had his.
He had other stuff.
He had his life, and he was comfortable.
But he's very iconic though because of the ads in SCD all these years. Because it was always the picture of him with that hat on.
Right.
It said, Fritsch Cards, and so the plaid shirt, the hat. I mean, I almost kind of feel like you knew him just from looking at those ads for so long. But until you met him, you really didn't understand, how personable, he was.
I think he was guarded. But personable once you get through the thing. And Jeff, I always thought Jeff was a little, when Jeff was a little boy was when Jeff never probably remembered a time that there weren't these warehouses full of these amazing cards.
LPG cases.
Yeah, just crazy stuff, and it was always in volume. So
I consider myself very fortunate to have gone up there twice.
I don't, like I said, I don't, when I look back, I think we made a number of attempts. We had a lot of success in a lot of things we did, but we made some investment in your time and going up there and trying to prepare proposals for him that were ultimately unsuccessful, but you can't win them all. And we weren't willing to do things we were not an overpromise and underdeliver company. And so I think you went up there with best efforts, best intentions, and put our best case forward. I went up there, but it wasn't. There were just no sweeteners I could do other than we'd like to work with you, and some of that relationship would have been like you said, tricky. You or somebody else. In fact, the other thing is, who would have been the person to go up there and live there? I mean, somebody would have had to live there.
Right.
And I don't know if Cheryl would have said, and your sons would have said, "Hey, Dad, we really want to move to northern Wisconsin out in the middle of nowhere." But it would have taken somebody with high integrity. And I don't know if that had been one person or two persons, but you're talking about millions and millions of cards. And then you got to get them down here and grade them. And so it's just, I think we're, any last recollections of Larry and Jeff? I wasn't around Jeff as much as I was around Larry, and I had a lot of phone conversations with Larry. But
I just love the whole. I love the whole idea of it up there in the woods. I love the whole idea of those guys.
They were their own men,
native Wisconsins,
and they weren't just dreamer visionaries. They made it happen.
They made it happen. Yeah. So.
Well, we miss you, Larry and Jeff, and as we've said for some of these other tributes of mostly men who've gone before us. And have been a good example and have stayed the course and finished the race. So thanks, Fritsch's, for your contributions to this great industry. Thanks, Pepper, for bringing your perspective to those guys. And again, thank you, listeners, for making it possible. If nobody listened, what would you call a podcast that nobody listened to? A former podcast, perhaps. So enjoying doing this, enjoying remembering some great guys. So again, thanks, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.